Welcome to Magic is Real, the podcast where we focus on spiritual journeys, near-death experiences, and all things metaphysical and spiritual. If this podcast resonates with you, it would mean the world if you can like, subscribe, and share with like-minded friends. Thank you so much for being here with an open heart and mind. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Magic is Real. I'm Shannon, and I'm your host. And today I have with me Joanie, who is a near-death experiencer, a Kundalini experiencer. And today we're going to talk about her spiritual journey, her experiences. And I welcome you, Joanie. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for letting me do this.
I'm so happy that we're doing this. I would love to start, as I usually do, by learning a little bit about you. And before we started rolling, we were talking about how you've had several near-death experiences, out-of-body experience type experiences. And I would love to know, then you said that something that had resonated with you in watching this podcast, for one thing, is how so many people who've had near-death experiences, this all started really young for a lot of people. So I'd love to know a little bit about whatever you're comfortable sharing about your background and your whatever you're comfortable sharing about your history and your spiritual journey. Wherever you want to start is great with me.
Okay. Well, so I did just recently learn that often lucid lucid dreamers. I really just learned about lucid dreaming within the last, less than a decade. But that you might have an experience really early, and so I did. In fact, so my mother coordinated with that, and so that happened when I was a baby. um I know that I had some out of body experiences um around age 4, but that's kind of a shady memory, but there's definitely some trauma involved there. And we just don't talk about it, which is fine with me. And then when I was the week of my 16th birthday, I was abducted on my way to work. So this would have been like 1989 or 90 or something. And that experience was, where I had what I would say is my first near death experience, right? That I was fully aware of. And left my body there, went off, in above the trees. And then I had another experience a year later, where I feel like I can now say this was near death number 3, where um, uh, I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and I kept telling him, your dad is a little too handsy, and his dad had passed out on me, and I was stuck underneath him. I was very small, I'm very petite, and I couldn't breathe, and I left my body. Then I didn't know at the time. I didn't see that one at the time as being, a near death. To me, I just felt like an out of body, and this is where I guess I'll just go this way. But before I continue, because I didn't want to skip this, because this is at a young age, I had the dreamy stuff, the lucid dreams. I was an active participant in my dreams from as long as I can remember. I actually still can remember the dream that I turned around and faced what was chasing me. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old, and I just got tired of it, and I just turned around, and I don't want to be chased anymore. And so that was the moment I realized that maybe I had some control over my dreams. And so I just kind of assumed everyone did that. Why would I ever think anything different? And my life included consistent moves. I went to 22 schools before I graduated from high school. And so there were some years that I would go to two schools in one year. And so it was consistently the new kid, which makes you always happen to read people.
Mhm. Yep.
Which lends to know thyself, because now I'm on the other end. So now I'm going to go back. I'm going to fast forward into time for a second where I know what some of my gifts are, right?
Yeah.
Because this was what was presented to me at a young age. It also made me extremely loving and caring and compassionate towards people when I was young who might have peculiar, abnormalities. From having a friend at one school that had a glass eye, who I just thought was the coolest, raddest thing ever, to, friends that had Down syndrome, to, walkers, to, anything under the sun. They were quick to accept me. Right.
Mhm.
And so I was, a questioner as a kid, which I believe is that lucid state. And I had dreams of writing, and I did, won a couple of awards and things like that. So my life was kind of this roller coaster. So I never really got to know anyone to find out what thing, I never got to know anyone. There was not that happening. So now I'll fast forward a little to the time that I was under that man. And that was just an out of body. I just kind of blooped up out of myself and sat up like rafters, kind of, and had a conversation with myself, like, that's your life. Is that what you want? Is this going to be the future that you had envisioned for yourself? And I was 17, and to me, that kind of was, I have heard other people describe exactly that type of scenario. And I think, yes, somebody else experienced it too. And so when, everything's kind of hazy, and we do know that there was, definitely some non-breathing and purple events. So that I immediately, like, everyone's freaking out. That's there. My boyfriend comes in, and so there's this big, and the next thing I remember, I'm packing my bags and I'm like, F this, I'm out, and I changed everything about my life, people, places, and things. I went down crazy, it just changed everything. And you know, I, I started, I did grow up in church, although I wasn't real crazy about the Pentecostal movement, but I got back in my Bible and started going to these types of events. And I changed everything. All my friends changed. I switched schools. And then I met a guy my senior year who I ended up marrying real quick, like, and my parents had moved back and left me in another state a month before I was set to graduate, which, I don't know, whatever. But that it caused me to have a choice. Now I got to make a choice. And I have ideas of joining, the Peace Corps, or what, whatever. And here this guy goes, no, marry me, let's go to college. And I'm like, okay. So that was kind of, how I ended up there. So really young, I was married, and my life was really good. I had a great life. And so I thought, right. So then comes, the final tier of my experience. And I find out that I'm married to, basically the devil, narcissistic wise. Right. So pure victim. Never saw it coming, had none of those signs. Everybody's like, how do you not see? I'm like, I didn't see. I don't know. I'm an idiot. I don't know. But that that right there, like, it shook my entire foundation. I got in the relationship with that man because I felt like God was leading me in that direction. This was, my new life and my new, and you get this in your mind, and you think you've prayed and here he comes, and you think your life is great, and then you wake up one day and you might as well be married to a serial killer. I have no idea who you are. You have other women in other towns. I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I just, and I walked in on him and my best friend, and it just, put the whole thing just went. And then so that happened, and that sent me down what I now think they refer to as like the dark side of the soul,
Mhm.
right? So I went through a complete breakdown of my identity for about 3 years. I had, you know, everything that I thought I knew about my life was now suddenly a question. He had everyone convinced, that it was me. And then, I had let go of a lot of things. My career, my any dream I had. It was a stand-up comedian for a while. And I wrote for my local paper as a contributing editor. And, but I gave up a lot, and I gave up friends, and you know, I, you just go, well, who am I? I don't even know now. I don't know. I was his wife. It was, you know, that. And so that lasted. And then I had now hit a complete, my body was just broken. What I've come to learn now happens with people who have, trauma or perceived or real. I think that's another thing that I like to share with people when I get a chance, is that some of the stuff that I do study, and research, fear is there. That's one of my favorite topics. And our fear is our body reacts, perceived real or
Yeah.
non-real. So if you've been boogeyman, that is
Mhm.
the same as somebody grabbing you. It doesn't matter. The brain can't tell the difference. You've been
Yeah.
traumatized. Okay, so getting on these trains, of whose trauma is more than another is kind of a silly thing to play, and it
Yeah.
it doesn't help anyone. um, you know, um, but anyway, um, I sat in all of that. I remember the moment that I really had my kind of middle finger to God. Um, not to get in a lot of details, but I taught Sunday school. I had gone to a Christian university. As far as I knew, I was as perfect as they come. I'm not even an ag. I'm actually, I really, my husband will tell you, I'm a great wife, but I sat there in that dirty, just self, and I couldn't get up. I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't want to see anyone. I was just a disaster of a mess. And then my girlfriend calls me and she goes, "Oh my God, he brought her to church." My church. He never even went to church with me. Right. And so he like is dating this woman, like 2 weeks later, and takes her to that was it. That was just, what if I'd been there? Right.
Right.
I was just too depressed. My pastor didn't come see me. And outside of that call, nobody did. And I taught VBS and I taught Sunday. It was a huge, angry moment. And, I just had one of those mother nature type, I am woman, hear me roar, conversation with the big man upstairs. And so then that threw me into the dark side of the soul, if you will, where anything that could go wrong did go wrong. And I just couldn't keep it together. And my physical body was starting to show all of these signs. I was dizzy constantly. I've got people, accusing me of things, but I'm looking like I'm doing these things because I can't. I've got issues that make me walk in a diagonal anyway. I walk 2 feet over to my left side if I'm not paying attention. I'm just um so it was just, what is going on? And then I had a temporary state of amnesia. And that that was my, I like to describe that as my life review
Mm.
during that in between zone. I call the lucid state, I have my own language because, a lucid dreaming. I always called that the in between. Some people call it the twilight. As a little girl, it was the in between zone between being awake and going all the way to sleep. And so I always identified it as the in between zone, which had meaning later. That's again God's language. That's one of those little things that's in your pattern that you have to pick out. What does that mean to you? What is the in between? It's not just about your lucid state. That describes your life. You're a Libra ascending, right? It describes who you are. These are God's language, right? That's how I view it. Um, so I'm sitting there, and my life review goes a little bit different than most. I didn't see all the things I did wrong, Shannon. I'll try not to cry, but because I know that's so silly.
You
But
can cry, let it out.
I saw all the things I had done right.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So I got the visual of Benji for myself. And all of those moves that I hated as a kid. Um, I felt what those kids felt like to have a friend for 6 months,
Yeah.
and the universe took care of me during that time and brought an amazing woman into my life that helped me get my memories back. Um, but that, so the reason I don't want to share these things because I don't want somebody to go, oh, that's your ego. Yeah, sure. You're so good. But then I started thinking, why does everyone's have to be bad?
Yeah.
Why can't our life reviews be the good stuff? Why do we always focus on that? At that moment when I was in my low, what's the point of this place? This is ridiculous. I don't get it. I'm at odds. Um, so I had this, and then shortly after I got my memories back, and then that's when I had what I describe as the Kundalini, which is much different from lucid, much different from out of body, much different from near death. I go into the dream. So all the times that I have vivid memories of these four, well, three, because I can't remember being a baby, but my mother does know. Um, the three, I went. It was as if I fell into sleep. It was where everything starts dancing around. And then it's the dark. It's this. I just, as I got older though, and in the near death, those experiences went beyond that into, I think some people call it, I guess, the void. I don't like that term. It's
Mhm.
where I'm going to stay. It's my existence there. It's the creator. It's the imagination. It's where I belong there. That's my next job, I guess. I'm a thinker. I'm a professional brainstormer, and I have some of these, qualities that, for other open thought discussions of how I kind of play with that in my own imagination. If I was to write a story or tell my story in fiction terms, these are the ideas that I've come up with. This is how I view, like the Benji thing. That's just it's a visual, you know. So I'm here in this moment, Sat down. I'm sitting Indian style because I'm kind of forced to by my condition, and um, I just I'm awake. I'm awake. And this is where it kind of got really crazy for me. So this was about 8 years ago. Um, a snake just bloop. Beautiful cobra, glitter, rainbow, iridescent, absolutely dazzling. When I think no fear, no fear. It felt. I got all the references throughout our known fairy tales and history and imagery of why the cobra is so. Ooh, it does. It did. Um, so I don't know what this is. Okay, as far as I know, I've lost my mind anyway. I have no idea. Okay, a snake, sure. Why the hell not? Right. But I had no reference to it. Can say I felt no fear at all. It was absolutely um amazing. I know that electric, I get pulses anyway, because of some of my condition, and so I got all that when I later learned. At the time I only knew this snake was there. I'm like, I'm losing my mind. And then it was at that moment that I had a voice outside my own. I've always been one to talk. I told you I'm a creative thinker. So, I mean, I'm write all kinds of fairy tales and ideas in my mind anyway. But this was another voice outside mine. This was the one thing, Shannon, I said that I haven't got an answer for yet. Well, the first thing I had was, I am. That's it. This is like in typical Gen X fashion, right? I'm it. That's it. Right. I am. Hello. It's us. We are. It's us. You are. I am. We are. Right. And then I have this other voice outside myself, and I'm I'm just I don't I cannot explain it other than I'm like, who are you? And he says his name, and that doesn't help me. And he says, I've been with you forever, right? Your whole life. Now, the interesting thing here is is that I did have an imaginary friend as a little girl, which most of us did. So that doesn't make me abnormal. When I was little, I thought, but his name was John, and he was like a big brother to me. And so it was an only child, so who moved a lot. So, this figure was typical for psychology 101 of what I would have come up with as a protective agent. That blew my mind, and I'm like, what? And I said, well, prove it then. Now I'm like, so this is my challenge to the gods. And okay, I kid you not. And I do have witness. Um, he said, well, write down these 5 words. So I got his first and last name. I got a date. I got a month. I got a town. I got railroad and fire, something like that. No, railroad, fire. Yeah, fire. So it was like these 5 different things. And he says, like, type it in, search it. And I did. And I knew I was going to come up with jack squat. I knew this was ridiculous. What this, dreaming, and it didn't. It brought me to a lady. The very first after, this was a few years ago, so the internet was still changed a lot even and then. But the very first one was this lady in this town. That was the name, who was uploading old documents as she was told to get rid of them. And instead of throwing them away, she was uploading them. And he's like, that's it. And I'm, what? And we go and we scroll the month that, okay, here's the funny part. So again, there was so much compacted in this one little moment that I can't deny it. Okay. It's as if there were so many miracles. You're kind of like, there's no way all of that could be. If one or two of those things had taken place, I could have dismissed it out the window. Right.
Yeah.
But too many. And you're just like, oh. So I go to the date and I go, your name's not there. No, it's like, wait a minute. Scroll down. And I scroll down. It was there. She had put him in the wrong. His name had the month, but she had put it in the wrong month. So the information said his month, but when she lowered him in, she put him in this one below in the month of October instead of November instead of October. That blew my mind. How did you know that? Railroad. That's how he died. And then he says, my son died in a house fire. Scroll down. Whatever, how many months back? There's the son,
There's the
the
fire.
same last name in a fire. And then he says, my wife, her name should be there. I don't see a woman's name. And at that point, he kind of goes, well, I'll see you later, kid. Kind of, that's not what he said, but that is how it felt.
Yeah.
He left. And I've never talked to him, seen him. I can't remember the code words, although I did write them down on a piece of paper. But that piece of paper I have boxes of, this. So, who knows? But I did have a witness, and that kind of had helped me because I knew I wasn't dreaming. I knew it was happening, and I had written it down, and I had someone there that trusted me and knew I wouldn't have been making it up. Right. That's so not me. So that's the one I can't explain yet. But after he left, that's when I started to get to know my upper self. And that's when I started having a lot more of those in between pots,
Hmm.
near fainting, full fainting episodes. And I was consistently being bounced back and forth between zones. And I had a lot of really neat experiences there. Um, uh, so after that thing with the snake and then John, my imaginary friend, I immediately called my therapist. I said, I'm losing my mind. You've got to save me. I'm dying. And she's like, calm down, come see me. So she's working with me because of the amnesia. So I was, instantly with somebody that had taken me on to keep me out of care, because of the event that I had with the abduction. I can't do hospitals and things, because it, that just unpacks new things. So, yeah, so she had me come in. Now I just met her. I didn't know anything about her. And I'm telling her what happened. I'm telling her about the snake. And I'm telling her about, what the voices are telling me. And I said it tells me things. It says like, don't worship anything, no people, no places, no things, no nouns. Basically, God doesn't like nouns. And these kinds of things. And I said some stuff which I can't remember now. And she goes, okay, hang on. And she pulls the book off her shelf and she opens it up. Well, she asked me, she says, do you know anything about yoga? Right. No, I don't know. And then she proceeds to read out of this book verbatim what I had just said. And again, I'm like, what is happening to me? What is happening to me? And that's where I started to recognize what, the Kundalini or the, the third eye awakening, the reality to reality, and so that was then my quest. And I did a hypnosis session, which yielded great results for me in my process of I had to do it myself. I'm doing it myself. Why? Because that's what makes it authentic.
Mhm.
My healing has to come from within. I needed to figure this all out myself first so that then I could go and share it with other people. Um, because, you know, I met somebody right at that time, we're, shortly between the snake and some of the supernatural events, which I can mention if you want, just because they're kind of interesting, but it doesn't, it's not necessarily relevant. But I met this gentleman who I recently, like literally during this process, ended up hooking back up with 7 years later. So how's that for a thing? Right as I'm contacting with you, I'm also running into him. I That's synchronicities, I suppose. But he was kind enough to talk to me, and I bought his book, and he had had a kundalini, and he says to me, he says, "Okay, there's something that's going to happen to you. It happens to all of us. Don't write a book like me and make a fool of yourself." He said, "But you're going to think that you're God for a minute. You're just really going to think that you're going to know everything, right? You're going to have a real good grasp on the world." He said, "Don't fall for that yet. Give it time. Let that go over and find where you are." And best advice I was ever given,
Yeah.
and my family was such a great support. I even said to my husband, I said, "Okay, if I decide that I am an alien and I'm come here from another planet, will you still love me? And will you support me if I want to go to, meetings and conferences?" And he said, "Yes, absolutely. Of course, anything, anything." I don't know what the world is. I don't know what it is anymore. That's how completely broken I was. For all I know, it could be aliens. It could be angels. It could be the devil. I have no idea. Why not? Any idea sounds any crazier than the rest. That was where I was. And I had such a great support system that was says, sure, why not? We don't know either. We don't know either. So I got to explore a lot of avenues there. And this is kind of where I started having those very bizarre experiences.
I
Mhm.
want to start with the fact that you addressed trauma. Now, from what I understand, I have a lot of friends who've experienced trauma, who have PTSD, complex
Mhm.
PTSD, and we don't have to obviously won't talk about the trauma itself, but what it does to the brain. So one thing that you addressed is doesn't matter what your trauma is, your brain reacts the same way. And I was actually just saying that today about one of my best friends, like, I was mentioning this with somebody else when we're talking about trauma, is that she's even acknowledged, look, I didn't go through war, I didn't suffer assault, but her brain, she had a series of very stressful situations throughout her life, and eventually her brain just reacted. And so it didn't matter that she wasn't physically assaulted, it was or that she wasn't in a war. It's her brain still responded in a way that caused her to have PTSD symptoms. So there was a war going on in her brain to the point where it doesn't matter the trigger, she's still collapsing in a heap, having
Yeah,
amnesia, forgetting
yeah,
chunks of time, sobbing in a heap, being triggered really easily, irritability, all these things, right? Well, she's also highly, highly psychic, although she was never a believer until she saw what I'm doing. Um,
yeah.
what happens, a lot of mediums, for example, have gone through trauma. So what happens is that your amygdala is the fear center of your brain. That's also the part that is affected when you have PTSD. You've experienced abuse. So when you've experienced abuse or whatever it is, your brain starts to go into a loop of we have to make sure this doesn't happen again. So we're going to
Mhm.
constantly send danger signals to keep you on your toes so that you're always prepared. You're hyper vigilant. Well, what
Yes.
happens when your brain goes into hypervigilance is that then you're suddenly picking up on information from other radio stations, as I call it, as
Mhm.
a medium. So you're now not picking up on just the 3D, you're picking up on the 5D, you're picking up on all these subtle things that other people don't immediately see. But suddenly your intuition is heightened. So we're going to start with as a child, first of all. So it makes sense, is what I'm saying, is that you experienced trauma and therefore you've suddenly become more receptive to the things that most people can't see because their
Mhm.
brain it's just wired differently. And that's why you started to receive downloads from spirit
Mhm.
randomly. Maybe there's no reason John came to, I mean, John was identifying himself to you. John's like, I was
Yeah.
always there, but I'm just going to now prove that I'm actually a soul and I'm going to communicate with you this way. Also your Kundalini awakening. Now I wanted to ask you, were you in meditation when this happened, or did it just hit you in the
I
middle
was
of the
sitting there
day?
smoking a cigarette on the back porch on the floor,
Yeah.
in a yoga position at crisscross applesauce because of my blood pressure. I have always sat with my feet up.
Yeah.
Again, those are those things that your body was screaming to you as a child. But that's unladylike. My dad apologized actually because I would get in trouble for having my feet up all the time. But I would get sick if I didn't. It's the body's what I've learned more than any more than anything, we have to recognize how completely magical our bodies are and how they know what to do. My body knows, get a leg up, girl. You're
Yeah.
going to pass out in a minute. You need to sit down. You don't feel well. Go, go, go. And we don't listen to those things. And that's what ends up flat on our face. And that's what ends up in the mud. Our gut, and that's our bodies, my body. I'll tell you one of the interesting things. Okay. This is one of the fun things that I get from my upper being is like you were saying, a state of heightened sensitivity. So I've massive problems with screaming ears, right? But then I've had them my whole life. I don't know any other way, but it makes me loud and at times, and sometimes that can be really obnoxious. But they're linked. The noises they make are linked to the state of my heart beating. So if my heart has a moment of anxiety, my ears go loud.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's interesting because sometimes I'm just kind of doing something like I'm crocheting or I'm just kind of vegged out or reading and all of a sudden my ears and something in my peripheral would be just what I needed. Something I needed to pay attention to, not so much for to be warned, but to be like, hey, something being said over here is awesome. You might want to put down that and pay attention to this audiobook you're listening to
Hmm.
because this sentence right here that's about to be said gonna blow your mind.
Yeah.
And so that became a communication tool then, for me. And I find that to be a fun one to play with. So I encourage others that also have these types of heart palpitation type experiences to maybe play with that idea that your unconscious self can use those. Maybe you don't want to cure yourself of your tinnitus.
Right.
Maybe you want to learn to live with it. Maybe our disability. I don't take anything. I've learned to work with I like my condition. I like being in the in between zone at times. Sometimes I feel like walking through the house is like being in a fun house. The floor is moving. I want to start singing songs from Greece. It's just this complete kind of, you know, fun house type experience. I do have an Instagram, uh, the retro zebra, and I did a lot of memes about my experiences as I was unlocking some of my conditions and all that came with that genetic thing. So that was kind of a fun thing I did for a minute. Um,
So you were in like when you had your Kundalini awakening, you were just sitting there relaxing, so you were more receptive. And then when you saw the snake, was it in your mind's eye? Would you say? Like, how
oh
did you
yeah,
perceive? Yeah.
it was like super. It was as if it was 3 days. So
Yeah.
it was as if this, but it came almost in between.
Yeah. In the in
You
between. I
know,
get what you mean. Yeah.
hmm
That's where,
like
as a
a
media.
glasses. In a 3D
Yeah.
movie where you have that thing that's in that in between place. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to talk about trauma too, because you had said, you know, with the experience with your boyfriend's stepdad or father, um, these are the times when your body left. So I want to talk about that because when you go through
Yes.
trauma, my mom had an out of body experience when she was a kid. And it was just because she had the stomach flu and she was throwing up and her body, and she just was so uncomfortable that her soul just jetted. and was like, we're
Sure.
getting out of here. And that often happens with people who are experiencing a traumatic event. So you had an abduction situation where you needed to evacuate
Oh,
your
yeah, I just
body
left.
because it's
Yeah.
so traumatic. Um, and for the way you described it, um, this thing was happening, and then you left, and basically you're just above the trees. In your mind, I mean, in your experience, that was your body's way of protecting yourself by just leaving the body to let the body take the brunt of things while you left the building. And that's actually a protective mechanism that serves, can serve really well. And it can also, it happens actually with dissociative identity disorder where the brain creates other personas to take the brunt of the abuse so that the actual person, the core person, doesn't have to feel it. They're different, but there's sort of a similar mechanism where your soul is trying to protect yourself from the abuse. So it sounds like every time you encountered a traumatic event, your soul was like, I'm just going to leave to
Yeah.
hover above so I don't have to witness this. You said you had 4 out of body experiences, and you don't have to tell me, like, what was happening, but were they all under traumatic circumstances? Or were
No,
then
I've had 4 near death,
Yeah,
but I have had tons of out of body. I have those quite often,
yeah,
actually. So maybe, I mean, I don't know. I can't put it up because it really just depends on my cycle. Sometimes I can have 2 in a day. Sometimes I don't. I can go a week or a month and I'll have any. It
yeah,
just depends on, where I'm at in my, roller coaster of. We all have that. We all
yeah,
know what I'm talking about. Everyone has that. You know, I know when I'm up and when I'm down. And so when you're at your weakest, but I do totally, because it took me about 10 years of therapy after the abduction, just to even, somewhat function correctly in
yeah,
some ways. So so I did know about that then, that
yeah,
because I don't have full recollection. I have snapshots as if I
mhm,
opened my eyes and then go, nope, F this, I'm out.
yeah,
Not yet, not yet. I don't actually know how I made it through. So again, one of those things where I just appear somewhere else.
yeah,
Which is why I like the movies. And because I think that is a great way for, even if it is a superhero that goes from here to here, okay, it's a metaphor. It's an example of what that feels like. It feels as if you're just boop, boop. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to, it's a time slip. Um, I would have experiences where I would have a sensation as if I'm skipping, like a, you
yeah,
know, skipping through the near fainting experience. And so it's as if I can see myself in multiple layers, as if
mm,
I'm kind of, I know I'm just making, I mean, I get what it is, but it's an expression of how to explain the sensation. This is the sensation. I don't know why I'm having the sensation, but I'm
yeah,
having it. That doesn't, what does that mean?
right.
It only means what I want it to mean. It just means that, hey, it feels like I'm skipping,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
it feels like
and
when
I
that
like it.
yeah, it feels like when that happens to you, you do, like you said, you go in between zones in a sense, and I think that's something that, like, as it sounds to me like as a child, this was a coping mechanism, where you literally did leave your body, like, you didn't imagine it, but
Mhm.
it's now your body knows, "Oh, we can do that thing again," to kind of help us cope, but also to it now that you're in that you've gone into the zone, you know the zone. Your soul is
Right.
very familiar with and we call it some people call it the other side, other dimensions, um, the 5D, whatever it is. It feels like you can kind of easily float in and out at will. And ironically, it's the trauma that taught you how to do that, which for better or for worse, it is what it is, right? Like it's not good or
Mhm.
bad. It's just that as a trauma response, your soul and your brain learn to work together to say, okay, well, when something stressful is happening, I'm going to just go somewhere else. And
Yeah.
now and I think it's important to note too that there's a fine line between um some people might say, oh, that's mental illness. Well, I think that in some cases it's mental illness, but like PTSD is not actually an illness. It's
Mhm.
a coping mechanism that's actually designed to serve us, to protect us from trauma. Unfortunately, it goes haywire and then it overfunctions.
It's a physical expression
Yeah.
of the emotional trauma.
Yeah. That
So
makes
it's how it oozes out of us. So it oozes out of me this way, and it
yeah.
oozes out of you that way. And so we're putting, fibromyalgia is another one.
Yeah. Oh,
That's a
yeah.
traumatic response disorder.
Yep.
Um, there's a lot of them actually.
I have
Neuropathy.
one. I
I
have
mean,
one called muscle tension dysphonia, and
okay.
it's so interesting because as a kid, my go-to when I was experiencing high stress was to stop speaking. So I became what they call selective mute,
Hmm.
and I did
Hmm.
not speak for 3 years, even though I was very verbal and I could read by the time I was 3. I think my mom told me, and I stopped speaking because of my sensitivity. So what's interesting to me is I didn't even really put it all together until a few years ago. I'm a voice actor and I developed a vocal disorder, vocal cord dysfunction, which was a physical manifestation because I had acid
Yes.
reflux, because I have SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it caused tension in my throat. But then even after like I got the acid under control, it became a stress disorder. And that's when I learned more about it and found out that there's a category of mind body connection disorders. PTSD,
Mhm.
fibromyalgia, muscle tension dysphonia, and I forget what else. I forget what else it was, but there were like 4 or 5, and they're all categorized as the way that your body and your brain reacted to trauma. And it's like I said, I didn't experience severe trauma, but I experienced a lot of emotional trauma. So,
Mm.
just in my own head, I had a beautiful family, thank God, and nothing terrible happened. But um, my body got overloaded with stress because I have a very, very sensitive nervous system. So over time, even the littlest stresses can send me into what happens is my throat closes up and
Mhm.
all the muscles in my neck get so tight that my vocal cords won't flow together. And I'm a voice actor.
You're allergic to stress.
I'm allergic to stress, literally. And so it's taken 3 years to learn how to control it. But even this week, I'm about to move cross country. So I'm starting to feel the tension coming back. And where does it go? Right here. And this
Mm.
is my voicing and my ability to express myself. And it shuts right down. And then I can't talk. And I'm like this. And so there are all these manifestations in response to stress. But it's interesting because I think what you've shared really does show that also it opens up your third eye because like in my friend's case, she had has PTSD and all of a sudden she was predicting things that would happen. She would think of somebody and she would see them. She would know
Mhm.
what was going to happen ahead of time. She could and even then she's a skeptic. So she'd be like, "Well, I don't know what that is." And I'm like, "I know what it is, girl. Like you're a psychic. You're
I've
a
had
medium."
those. I've
Yeah,
freaked people out before with things, most definitely.
like premonitions and that's because your brain is like turning on in a way that most people's don't. So we are like alert to danger, but we're also alert to the super not the su what people call the supernatural, I call it very natural. It's turning on the ability to see through the veil and to connect with the
Yeah.
other side. So I love what you said. I don't wanna minimize anyone's trauma, but what you have
Mhm.
done is you've taken your trauma and found the gifts within that as you've also done your healing and like therapy, which is great. I want to say a lot of people are afraid to reach out for help. What you went through is hugely traumatic, and thank God that you have the support and that you've chosen to take care of yourself, but also to be able to see that, okay, this might make me a little quote unquote weird, like that I'm in this other dimension half
Yeah.
the time. But the thing is, someone could look at you and go, well, oh yeah, she's just, I think people dismiss these experiences
I'm
as like,
just Joni. I'm
yeah,
just me,
this is
you
like,
know?
you are actually tapped in and tuned in a way that people may not understand, but I do because like a lot of us have that same experience where I talk to dead people. So that makes me a little weird. But and I don't know, I've always been sensitive. So I think that it's really beautiful that you're embracing the stuff that you're getting and you're open to it and you're not dismissing it as, well, I have trauma, therefore I must be insane. It's like, no, you have
Right.
trauma and now you have this higher perceptive ability that allows you to pick up on things and to be imaginative and creative and to tap into what we don't see, what most of us don't have I don't know if it's good fortune or not, but we don't have
It's imagination.
it's
I
imagination.
just really think it's just nobody is using their imaginations anymore.
Yep.
That's the lucid state. That's where you get to make up everything.
Yep.
I haven't. You can make whatever you want there in the lucid state, wherever you want to go. But nobody's using their imagination these days. Everyone is copying someone else's imagination or refining it. Well, maybe I wanted to wear a blue shirt today instead of a pink shirt. Where's your imagination? Where's your unique thought of something? It's the movie industry seems somewhat boring these days. I'm like, seen it 15 times, seen it. Nobody has any new thoughts. I have
Yeah.
ideas. I sometimes I have chats with my friends and they're like, okay, 6 impossible things before breakfast, go.
Yeah.
And you're just thinking something different, you
Outside the
know.
box is what kind of where you were going. And I when I learned mediumship, one of my teachers, Susan Schuler, said the place where mediumship comes from is the same place imagination comes from. So when you're doing a reading, you're going to feel like you're making it up.
Exactly.
So I learned, so that was uncomfortable at first because I need hard facts. I'm like you. We talked about we're both very analytical by nature and skeptical by nature. And
Yep.
even though right now we don't seem that way, we are. And I would say, but how do I know I'm not making it? I mean, how do I know that I'm not just making it up and the person's just hearing what they want to hear? Well, I've learned that that cannot be true because when I do readings, I come up with names, dates, like things that I couldn't possibly know. And I'm like, even if that was my imagination, I'd have to be so lucky to get that accurate
Oh,
every time. But it's about when you're doing a mediumship reading, for example, you're doing it from your same place as imagination. So it will
yes.
feel like you're making it up. And one of my friends is a medium and he played when he helped teach me mediumship, he said, we're going to play a game that I call the makeup game. And he does this to test people's mediumship abilities. Just, it's like, so he'll say, okay, I want you to tap into my Uncle John on the other side. And he goes, just go. And the person's like, what do you mean? And he's like, just tell me about my Uncle John in spirit. So he did it with me. And he said, I want you to connect with my friend Kenna. Tell me about her. And I was like, okay, she is he goes, what color hair does she have? I'm like, brown. How long is it? Shoulder length. She dating? A guy named Jason. And I remember this
Right.
is exactly how the conversation went. I
Yeah.
was right about everything. And he's like,
Wow.
I felt like I'm creating a character, I'm making it up. And he's like, it's the same thing as imagination. I told him how she passed. Jason was the guy that she was hanging out with. I knew what he looked like. I could see a prescription bottle in her purse. I knew that that's how she died. And it was like he just kept asking me questions, rapid fire. Don't stop to think. Just go with your imagination and you'll find that it's true. Like the things that you're saying are actually true. So I love that you brought forward the idea of
That
imagination
well,
flowing.
that is kind of how that John experience was. I was like, okay, what's your name?
Yeah. Haha.
How'd you die? He gives me a
Hmm.
railroad sign. Where are you from? What year?
Yeah.
And
You
it
just
was
let it
like,
come out.
gotcha. Yeah, I was right, wasn't I? There I am. Ha ha ha. Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what's to be learned here is that so much of what we think our brains are just being nuts. Or like you went to your therapist and you're like, "Am I losing my mind?"
I did.
No, you're actually finding it. You're actually finding your soul, your higher self. And so
Mhm.
I think it's really interesting how we're all made of energy and we all um like you said have this history of a childhood where you just kept leaving your body because things were difficult. And yet now, you're able to see, oh my gosh, my mind's being blown left and right because now I'm really understanding how it all kind of comes together. And you and I talked right before um we started recording about how people might think it's insane and you're like, look, my theories are my truth. I don't mine might be different from yours. And the thing is it's your truth. And your experiences are real as anybody else's. And it doesn't make them wrong or right. It just means this is how you perceive them or experience them.
Yeah.
And when it comes to this stuff that a lot of people dismiss as woo woo, I think that there's something really to be learned here that there is so much more going on than what's in the 3D world.
More.
So I want to just kind of end on asking you to say, what is it that you really want people to know?
Yeah. So, um, my the way I view the world now is that as the body, my little particle self and your little particle self there, we're particles, cells, whatever you like. I
Mhm.
don't care what flavor Kool-Aid you like, but we're all part of the body, the human body, together. I think everyone can agree. So with that though, I'd like to submit for, counsel or consideration that our body is in its adolescent or its teen, tween, double digit behavior stage. Our our Shemitah, our rite of passage, our 13, um, everything is saying that. And that's just one of the many things that line up. Think about the language that we have being used. We're being grounded. We have curfews. We're being restricted. Don't talk, even just the symbolisms of putting masks on our face, being, in trouble if we share the wrong link or we say the wrong thing, consistent with all of our social scores and our clicks, and everyone is, flying a flag of some sort. So now, what flag? I don't even know. What do I do? Um, you know, if we were to go back and imagine what it felt like to be 16, um, 12 even. One thing that I find really interesting about Revelation, we'll say, and then this end of the world apocalyptic zombie type, whatever, alien invasion, even these terms. Why I like aliens? Because the fear that we have associated with our adolescent years is the fear of being rejected, alienated, unwanted, unliked, unnecessary, an outcast, tossed to the side. That's our fear, not fitting in. um I see that on math. Everyone's popping off with that fear. We're all so scared that we're not gonna, and we have terms like social scores and these ideas of of I think of that scene in the movie Heathers where, like, the counselor, she comes in, she's like, okay, class, how do we feel about, you remember her? She's all
Don't remember.
kumbaya.
Yeah.
I think that sounds good, but that's not what's happening. We're just running amok in the school. The interesting thing about the end of the world is that something happens to us when we hit our double digits. I didn't just come across this idea because I thought of it. I have
Mhm.
science behind it. Um, the human mind, when it hits double digits, so puberty, around 9 years old, starts to go through a metamorphosis. The brain starts to get bigger, but it's not in size. That's where all your folds start to take place. It begins to, shrink and grow at the same time, right? So it looks
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
shrinking, but it's really growing. And during this stage, things that aren't needed get pruned, and they actually call it a pruning stage for the brain. This is why we have lost knowledge, because every stage we go through, every time we have a stage as a child and we go through an I am moment where we declare ourselves a new being. I am safe. I can feed myself. I can put my shoes on. I can go outside. I don't really even need a mom if I don't want one. That's an I am moment. That's our first major one. We have a few small ones. The next one comes at 12. 12 is, so 1 6, then 12. We have another I am moment. That's why it's a rite of passage. During that time, we have to stand up to whatever the bully is. That's why movies like Goonies and Stand By Me
Mhm.
are great references here, because the Sandlot, this is the age where we come together as a group.
Yeah.
It's no
Thanks.
longer
Yeah.
in me. It's a we, the
Mhm.
us against them. And that's why I say, it's not what I say. I can line it up. And this is where we're at. All you have to do is look at the timeline of human history, and you see we fall right here. This is our adolescence, and this is our time to turn around in the lucid dream, in the matrix, and say no to whatever it is that is chasing you. If that's a black vehicle for you, then turn around and say no. When I was a little girl, we lived in a house that I liked horror movies. Rightfully so. I've already worked that out in therapy. My therapist said that's totally normal for somebody like you. You faced death, you weren't afraid, you wanted to watch them. And I also like the fact that girls always kicked butt in them.
Mhm.
Right? To me, that was my comic book superhero. The boys had Batman. I had, whatever. So, so I remember, what was I saying? Hang on. Oh, I remember, I didn't like baths. So I took showers and I was 6 years old. I remember specifically, I had just watched that movie, The Alligator, under New York City. This was like 1979 or something.
Yeah.
And the drain in the bathroom at that time, when the water, it had a lot of little holes in it. When the water would drip through, it would look like a fish eye winking at you. And I would stand in that shower and I noticed it for the first time now after watching that movie. I was like, that's a giant fish under there in the pipes. You're a kid, you have imagination. I had imagination. And it's winking at me. And I'm like, okay, I don't like that. And I'm like, all right, Jesus loves me. You declare, you call right out to the one thing that finds you comfort, right? And I'm singing Jesus love me, and the power goes out. My dad said I screamed bloody murder. He'd have thought that I had just been eaten by whatever. But it was those moments that, I remember. Now I don't subscribe to that now. I talk to my upper being, my creator, my tether, I whatever you like. Um, if we could just recognize that we're in puberty,
Mhm.
you know, um, it works. It makes an answer for some things we don't have answers for. For some reason, it helped me grasp why the world looks the way it does, why we talk to each other the way we do, why I Pet Goat was so popular in the school. Why do we have these symbols? Why do we have these things? Why is school something I hear everyone saying it, but no one will say it? The body of God, the body, the human body as a whole, this is where we're at. And we're either going to stand up to our abuser. This is the age where boys and not boys necessarily, but girls and boys, kids, I mean to say, walk out of their houses. This is where there is no door that can hold me now. I'm the same size as you now, dad or mom. You can't hit me anymore. This is the age we do that. This is the age that we realize that we are in control of our own selves here. And then we run into puberty with the boy girl and the matrix. He's the sixth Neo, right?
Yeah.
Just how many stages we get to until we're right there at adolescence. And he picks the girl, not the rest of his friends. It's all around us, this symbolism of adolescence. It's everywhere. And for me, if I'm the only one that gets it and I'm the only one that finds that comforting, so be it. But I've shared it with a few other people who also find it helpful in their understanding of their gifts. This is no way to discredit. This idea does not say, hey, everybody, my idea is right. No, 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 no. Mine enhances how you look at your ideas. When you consider, so for example, timeline wise, just a few little interesting things. The Tower of Babel shows up when we're babies babbling. It's also when we did the Bronze Ages, which were we all, bronze our baby shoes. Jesus shows up at an I am moment, declares himself, I am 6. He's right there at preschool, toddler. What do we do when we're toddlers? Build with things. I don't know, blocks. We're very destructive as well, aren't we? We walk around, knock things over. That's all our ancient history. That's all they were doing. Noah's Ark shows up just as the baby can sit in the bathtub. I can't, I'm not making that up. I just laid them on top of each other. I noticed these things. You know, this thing we're all experiencing now, this isn't the end of humans. We still have several more stages to go. We have 4 stages, but childhood is that's our generation. So you can understand your stages through your generations. You have your young child years, and then you're an adult, young adult, and then you're middle age, and then you're elder. And we go through these stages, but our child, that first quarter of this pie is broke up into segments. That's interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the segment that we're in right now, and the big hands and the big clock of things, and the age of Aquarius, because that is adolescence, right? That's another thing that lines up all of your astrology. Bam, 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 fits on this timeline. It's so beautiful. You can see all of those things. And but these patterns start to play out. So what I know is that I'm only turning 12. I still have another 6 years to go before I've reached the mark of the beast, or a man, which is his number 18. Count the number 6, 6, 6. It's 3 6-year segments of a human life, which everyone agrees are I am moments. I didn't make that up. That's what we all will agree. We have rites and rituals and things throughout history. We've always marked these as points of reference to time. I don't know why we're not superimposing it onto our situation right now, why we're not looking at our behaviors. If I knew in high school, one of the number one things that people say when they're asked if you could change anything about high school, what would you change? And they say, I wouldn't give a crap.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't care so much what someone thought of me.
Yeah.
And so here we have a chance to
Yeah.
go back forward in time and come back here. This is time. We're time traveling together, everyone. We're going back to our teenage selves, and we're saying, what could you tell me right now, about how to navigate high school, right?
Yeah.
We might start looking at each other differently. There's also really amazing things about the human mind that don't involve eating each other in zombie apocalypse. We're not all like that. Teenagers are very resourceful. They're thinkers. They want to stand out. They have drive. They are fearless and believe that they're immortal. That's why comic book heroes are always in their teens. They feel immortal. That's the time you do. That's when
Yeah.
you're making risks. It also continues into your young adult years, because that's where we get everybody graduating and going out and trying to, do their 80s movies. I'm trying to think of that one with Michael J. Fox, where he's, trying to, climb the corporate ladder.
Oh, yeah. 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 I
These
forget what it's
films,
called, but yeah.
yeah, all those references are there. So that's kind of, that's a very probably dirty version. I didn't know how this was going to go, and I probably have said and embarrassed myself a little in some of the things that I've said, but I come at this. I have made up nothing. I have nothing to make up. There's no rhyme or reason to anything that's ever happened. If I could, I would. But trust me, nobody wants this all to be a laughable joke more than me. I keep waiting for a hidden camera. You're on Joe's show. You're on the Joni show. But I'm here now, and I didn't always like some of my near death. No, I didn't. That's not right. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't like what I mean is, I didn't like the way it made me feel when my experiences were discounted by others because I didn't have the rosy and the glow.
Mm-hmm.
And because I go to the in between and I'm going, this is the greatest place ever. And they go, you must have been in hell if it's all dark and disturbing. I'm like, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. I'm the devil. Well, then I'm the devil. And I had accepted that for a moment. Maybe I am the devil's daughter. Maybe that's where I belong. Who knows? Well, if it feels good, then that's where I'm supposed to be, right? Then if that's the case, that's the case.
Yeah,
Accept
everybody
that
has their
reality.
own everybody has their own the way that they experience the other realms and the other and we limit it to I mean, sometimes it's a near death experience because you actually died, and sometimes it's an out of body experience, and, I don't think that we have to yeah, everyone has their own valid, unique experience. So I thank you for being here and sharing yours and your perspectives.
Yes,
I think
thank
they're
you.
all equally valid. And so thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing and
Mm,
for a lot of really interesting, so much interesting food for thought. So thank you, Joni, for being here. It's been such a
thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you so much for listening with an open heart and mind, for your likes, subscribes, leaving comments below, and sharing with like minded friends. Your support means the world, and I could not do this without you.